At the seed stage, you might be tempted to jump at the first funding offer that comes your way. Don't do that. Instead, take a second to understand what each of the terms actually means. You're investing a ton of your time and money and effort into growing this company. In this video, I'll show you how to make sure you're getting the best deal for your company and that you're showing your investors you know what you're doing. Let's start with some basics. What are you actually selling in a Series Seed round? Well, you're selling preferred stock in your company. That means that the investors are becoming part owners of your company. And that's a little bit different and a lot more complex than the SAFE or the convertible note that you may have used in your pre-seed round. Remember that those SAFE and convertible note holders will be converting in the seed round. Preferred stock comes with preferences that put the investor on better footing than the founders and the employees. The concept is that the investors are investing in an early stage company, which is really risky. These preferences will help protect their downside. So the preferences may include liquidation preference, right to a board seat, pro rata right to participate in future rounds. But no matter what, remember that every term is up for negotiation. So it's really important that you understand the trade-offs of each specific term in the term sheet. And by far the most important part of the equation is how much control should you give up? In a typical seed round, you'll be selling about a 20% stake in your company. So your valuation is a really key term because it dictates the amount of capital that you can bring in for that 20% stake in your company. A higher valuation is better for founders. A lower valuation is better for investors. So it's the founder's job to sell a vision of the company that commands a higher valuation. Nailing the valuation is so important that I've put together a free in-depth guide on the seed funding process. You can check that out by clicking on the link in the description below or by going to westaway.com and checking out all my free founders guides. The guide breaks down the Series Seed term sheet term for term, and it also gives you guidance on the valuation and setting the right size of the option pool. Speaking of which, a standard seed round will include an option pool of about 10 to 15%. The option pool is simply some stock set aside, issued to new hires as you're growing the company. The idea is that you probably can't pay market rates just yet for talent, but you can incentivize them by issuing them a lot of shares early on in the company to grow the value of the company, and then everybody wins. If it's not negotiated correctly, the option pool can actually be a backdoor way in which investors can lower the overall valuation of the company. To avoid lowering your stock value, increase the pre-money valuation to account for the option pool and or decrease the total size of the pool. Therefore, it's essential that you model out the impact of the option pool on the cap table when you're considering any offer. Along with the option pool, there are a number of standard terms in the term sheet. Some of them are so common that you won't even negotiate them, but the last one is a huge red flag. After the valuation, the next most important term is the liquidation preference. This term simply dictates how the money is going to be split up upon an acquisition. So an investor with a liquidation preference will take a certain amount off the top, and then the other shareholders will share the rest of it. This is usually expressed as a multiple. So 1x would mean 100% of the capital invested, 2x would mean 200%, 3x would mean 300%. You get it. If your company sold for $10 million and your seed investors put in $1 million with a 2x preference, they would get the first $2 million off the top, and then the other shareholders would share the additional $8 million. Now beware, some investors will try to double dip. They'll try to take their percentage off the top and then also share in their pro rata percentage of the leftover. This is known as a participating liquidation preference. And if you see this in your term sheet, you should not sign it. You should do as much as you can to negotiate this away. A standard liquidation preference would be 1x non-participating. This allows investors to get their money back without screwing over employees and founders. Now, in addition to economic rights, investors are also looking for governance rights. A key governance provision is the board of directors. So the board of directors has the highest level of decision-making in the company. Typically speaking, a startup will have just the founders on the board until they get to the seed stage. Ideally, if you can, you'd like to negotiate for no board seats for the investors in the seed level, knowing that down the line, you'll definitely be taking some on in Series A and Series B. Keep in mind that in most rounds of financing, you'll bring on the lead investor as a board member. So if you're at 3 founders and 1 investor on a Series Seed, then as you add on the Series A, you'll be 3 to 2. And then by Series B, you'll be evenly split founders to investors. And after Series B, the investors will have control of the board of directors and thus of the company. One last very practical term on the term sheet is expenses. Now, expenses is all about who's paying the lawyers. There are some investors that are trying to force early stage, seed stage companies to pay for their legal bills. So these seed stage companies not only have to pay for their own legal bills, which could be sizable, but also the legal bills of the investors. A more fair way to do it is just for each party to pay for their own legal expenses. So negotiate for that. But if you can't can't for some reason negotiate that away, at least try to put a reasonable cap on the legal expenses for investors. Remember that no matter what, you do have leverage in this negotiation. If you've made it to a seed round, you've built an MVP, it's showing some traction, so you've already built something of value. Make sure not to give that away by making newbie mistakes. Check out my video on common startup legal mistakes for more, and pick up my free guide to Series Seed funding at westaway.com, or click on the link in the description below.